Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Pilates Hour. We're super excited today that I have my dear friend, Melissa Kakavas, with me today. So great to have you live in North Carolina.
Thank you for having me.
You bet, you bet. We've been friends for a while, and when I moved up to North Carolina, Melissa gave me a very nice welcome, and we've done a couple projects together and have enjoyed working in the North Carolina Triangle area. So it's good to have you.
I'm honored to be here.
So today we got a lot of topics that we could cover. And I think the biggest thing is for us to sort of work through some of the hot topics that most people don't like to talk about. And it's that relationship between the studio owner or the founder, the lead Pilates teacher, gyrotonic teacher, yoga teacher, as well as some of our lead teachers that are working with us and that we value so much, and trying to find that balance of, okay, we say we have a Pilates studio. How original is the Pilates work? Like, why are they coming to us? Those are some questions. Other things in the studio that we'll talk about today maybe is, the hot topic of employment or IC, independent contractors, is a hot topic right now. And every state's a little bit different, so we'll take that in consideration. While we start, I'd love to just give a little more intro and background on Melissa. So Melissa comes with multiple trainings under her belt from multiple schools, and is currently a senior educator for Balanced Body Education. She runs a studio owner, runner, operator, teacher extraordinaire. That is Remedy Movement in Raleigh, North Carolina, not too far from us, about 45, 50 minutes. And you continue to be sort of an icon in North Carolina is what I always say. Like wherever I go, it's like, oh yeah, there's this place over in Raleigh. Yeah, Melissa's place. I know about that place already. So you're very well known. You've taught a lot of the teachers in the area, the 4 or 5 states around us. Yeah. And so it's been great that, we started working on a project a while back of having sort of open house and potluck, Pilates potluck, that you and I sort of first came together to really work on a project.
Yeah, the North Carolina Pilates Collective that we created to bring the community together, get to know each other, let each other know what we're doing, that we're here, and start to create community.
And so we got stumped a little bit, obviously, with COVID, as everybody did. But today, we're going to come up with a date. That was one of our objectives of getting together, is a date that those of you that live in North Carolina or around and want to come in and spend some time together, very non-school based, just like professional Pilates teachers, that we can get together and have a good time, get to know each other, and talk about common things that we experience. And that's what we're doing today too. So let's kick it off with this whole idea of, we advertise that we teach Pilates in our studio. So my studio is down in Miami, your studio is here in Raleigh. We advertise, and there's, a certain perception of what Pilates is. And that can change wherever people get their Pilates. There's no constant like, oh, this is truly a Pilates center, or this is not a Pilates center, because there's so many different schools of Pilates teaching. And we like to think that if we're belonging to like the PMA or to, different certifying bodies and those kind of things, that we would be more similar than not. But I think it's probably more not than is. Yeah. And maybe we could talk about that a little bit. It's sort of like, what do you deal with as a studio owner and a teacher and an educator of people's perception when they come to the studio of what are they expecting when they see a Pilates class advertised?
So I think one of the biggest things to talk about in relation to that is how the industry has changed, and the people that are showing up as our clients are very different now than what they used to be. Back in the early 90s, it was a lot of dancers showing up that had a problem to solve. Yeah. And so our approach was to try to fix that problem. And, you had people that were coming in with a strong interest of movement, a strong knowledge of their body, and they were wanting to dive deep right off the bat. Now that Pilates has grown and become an industry, we're having a lot of different types of people showing up at our doorstep, some with a problem to solve, but others that are just looking for a more holistic way of moving that's going to build their body up versus breaking their body down. And those people don't necessarily want to be seen as a problem to solve. They want to experience the joy of movement. And so, as a studio, we really have to look at how we're showing up for our clients and listening to what they want and what they need. And I know for me, something you said a while ago, I heard you say a long time ago, that has really resonated and stuck with me, and is an intention every time I teach, is that I want them to have a positive movement experience. That is my number one goal, no matter who it is. Yeah. So where I'm going to go with them to give them that positive movement experience is going to depend on what they're needing and what they're looking for.
And that brings up a really important point, and that is, how do we know what our clients want and need? And how do they know what they want and need? How would they know what class is going to be the most appropriate class for them? What teacher is going to be the best qualified for their unique needs? And I just finished teaching a course called Critical Reasoning last weekend, and it just reiterated the fact again and again and again that, if we understand what their beliefs are, like somehow we have to be able to understand what people are expecting when they come to our studios. And for me, the bias has always been a little bit more on the fixing still because of the physical therapy component to it. But we realized, talking with Andreina and Monica, our studio manager, is that we're having a lot more people coming in, exactly what you said. I just want to take a movement class. I don't want to be assessed. I don't want to be evaluated. I just want to take a class, and I love this teacher, and so I signed up for months in advance with this teacher, kind of thing. And I find that very interesting. At the same time, it's like, I think Joseph's saying of practice contrology every day, that lifestyle, not going to a class. I think that's I've heard people say, well, if it's not in a class with a qualified classical Pilates teacher, it's not Pilates. And my thought is, well, Joseph Pilates himself used the word contrology, that we need to practice it every day. So how do we influence the lifestyle of our clients so that they are practicing contrology or Pilates every day of their life and throughout the day? Because I can tell you 3 hours a week is not going to make a big difference in a sedentary lifestyle of somebody that's sitting 13 hours a day. They have to incorporate what we're teaching somehow into their work. Leads me to the next question, and that is, we have this diverse population coming in now. Mm-hmm. How do we advertise so that the people that are looking for different things can match with the best class and the best teachers in our studios? I think that's a big challenge to a lot of us. Yeah. To be able to, how do we put it in the labeling of the class to know that this might be a Pilates and beyond kind of class, or that this one is, more of a classical Pilates class, or this one is a healthy spine class. Mm-hmm. What are some things that you're doing now to be able to differentiate that a little bit, so we can acknowledge our special teachers that, have been in years, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that really are taking things to the edge, and they have a following, and the following will go anywhere they go. Yeah. Versus advertising people who are newbies that just want to explore Pilates for the first time.
So, communication, if you can intercept in any way, is key, so that you grab them and understand them when they're coming in. But oftentimes, especially now that the group apparatus class, process has grown, you don't get the chance to intercept people in the same way. So they sign up online, and they don't really know what a movement principles class is versus a level 1 class versus a level 2 class. But one of the things we do is we have leveled classes, and we have an introductory level class, that we have a Pilates foundations class. And it's very clear that is what we recommend to everybody walking in the door.
How long does that last?
An hour.
And is it just one class that they come in and do before they can register for other classes, or is it?
They need to come in for that first, or be approved to sign up for a level 1 if they have Pilates experience coming in.
So there is a gate, like they pass through the gate of the intro to foundation. Mm-hmm. The teacher gets an idea of capacity of what might be the best match for them. Right. Do they take the liberty to coach them on what kind of class would be best for them? Good.
Yeah, that's an expectation for my teachers. If you teach a Pilates foundations class, it's expected that you're going to communicate after that class, I think you're ready to go into level 1, or I really think private sessions would be the best route for you. Yeah. And, it's really about how you communicate. A lot of people are uncomfortable having that conversation, but if you make it clear from the beginning that it's in the client's best interest, that I want you to get the most bang for your buck. I want you to have the best experience possible. And this is the pathway as your teacher
Right.
that I feel like would be best for you.
You know, we implemented years ago the Polestar screening. There was like
Mhm.
15 tests to do very early on, and we could really predict out of that where would be the most optimal place to go. But that often was more designated, as you mentioned, to private sessions,
Mhm.
right? So a private session, we could really identify how we're going to design a class or a session for that individual. But now looking at it where we're so heavily driven with group classes, and technology certainly has made it so, you know, we're still teaching tons of classes online as well as what we do in person in the studio. And you don't really have that pulse or that feedback on these individuals. And I guess that's sort of like, you know, in the critical reasoning course, the first question that I teach everybody is, what do you believe you should be participating in right now? Right? So the client's then saying, well, you know, I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. What do you believe is preventing you from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro? Well, you know, I haven't exercised in 20 years and I'm about 50 pounds overweight and I had total knee replacement, but I still have a dream of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. It's like we create alignment, not just alignment of the body, but alignment of mind and expectation in those questions. So once we identify, you know, what brings them here, why are you coming to do a Pilates class? What are you expecting? Is there anything that you're not able to do that you believe you should be able to do? Because immediately that kind of information allows us to put people into the right place or let them try and test some of the things, or even to identify a teacher that is going to be more appropriate for them.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think, especially in the private setting, you have such a great opportunity to really guide people. A lot of times in a group class setting, you're not getting the chance to have those conversations. So one of the things that we try to do at my studio, and that I personally feel is very important, is to have a really consistent process in particular in the group setting that is creating a foundation that is repeatable so that they can start to feel some progress, they can start to create an understanding there, and then, you know, move on from there.
Yeah. And I do agree that it's information. I think we could probably even get it to the point where, you know, when they sign up, they answer 2 or 3 questions digitally.
Yeah.
That might give us an inkling of, you know, if somebody's had tons of experience, they take a club Pilates, they've been to this place and that place, and they just want to come in and try out our class. That's a very different situation than somebody comes off the street that's, you know, been in the gym or something else, or somebody's been deconditioned, or somebody coming back after a surgery. Those are 4 very different scenarios of how we would want to create, you know, an opportunity for them, like you said, to have that successful experience.
Sure.
I always ask the question to studio owners of, you know, like, what's your flow like, you know? And so a lot of them will say, well, you know, we're booked up months in advance, we've got a waiting list. And then I ask the next question is it because it's so popular right now, or is it because and you're not retaining people, so there's always people to take their place, or is it because you're retaining people with such good outcomes that there's just not room to bring people in? And those are 2 very different scenarios. And the ones that I find that have good retention are ones that are communicating, right? Because if I can get you into the right class for you, I can pretty much guarantee in the Pilates industry, you're going to have a really good experience.
Right.
If I put you in the wrong class, you know, if we go into something that has a lot of Feldenkrais in it and you're a gym rat and you want to have some kind of burn and you make it a class that is too, you know, mindful for them, they'll leave.
Yeah.
They won't stick around.
Yeah.
So how do you give them something that says, hey, I can kick your butt in this class, but right now I need you to have some more, you know, you're all over the place with your body awareness, and we need to tighten that up a little bit as to you being familiar with your body and your form and your alignment. Can we do a combination where you take, you know, this person's class is going to, you know, give you a good workout, but you're, you know, you're all over the place, and one that's a little more mindful or something, and being able to direct them and educate them on the reason why they'd want to do that without losing their attention span.
Right. Well, that's what I have a really interesting band of gypsies teaching with me right now that have very diverse skills, diverse maturity levels, experience. I've got some very seasoned teachers. I've got people that are interested in different modalities and have different teaching styles. And it's a lot as a business owner. I'm very grateful for it because it does allow us to have a teacher for everyone, which I think is really cool about our space because our clientele is very diverse.
Do you give the client sort of the liberty or the suggestion of types of classes? You know, like you might take this class today because this is the one you could get in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that you might want to get on a wait list on this other class just based on watching you move and what you're interested in. I mean, do teachers have that prerogative to do that? Because I know in our studio and for years, you know, our healthy spine class, for example, you know, it has the same people that have been in there for 20 years.
Right, right.
Like we have to do healthy spine level 1, level 2, level 3, because they won't leave the healthy spine class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though they're doing level 3 work and they might have 1 or 2 modifications.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is that they're just convinced. So it's like we have to open up other healthy spine classes
Mm-hmm.
because that's what people are wanting coming from rehabilitation.
Right.
So it's just interesting to me of like, how do we give them liberty to explore a couple different classes to be before they give up, right? So if they come to one class and they go, oh, that was a little bit too froofy for me and I want to get a little bit more of a workout, then, you know, let's see if we can get you into this class. It's going to be a little more, you know, load, and this one's a little bit more awareness training.
Mm-hmm.
You know, have you had any success with being able to avoid that person that, you know, isn't happy with their first class to try again and come back? And do you pre-frame that out at all for them so that they can see the advantage of, you know, trying a couple different classes, a couple different teachers? You have that. You and I both have the same thing. We have a lot of teachers that they could choose from.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We try. And I will say I'm very lucky because the culture in our studio is very non-competitive and everyone respects each other and their particular teaching styles and skills. You know, we have, you know, a teacher that may be very detail oriented and very clinical. We have another teacher that may be more like have a lot more physical class, maybe more traditional style of teaching.
Right.
And then you've got another teacher that has her own magic and is very creative and experiential and uses a lot of more contemporary
the clients
methods.
find them who they like.
Yeah.
I mean,
and they do. And you know what's really cool that I've found is if you create the right culture and you build everyone up in your space, then they won't just go to that one person. We have clients in our studios that go to one class because they love what they're getting from that teacher, but then they'll take another teacher's class because they want something completely different.
We see that too. Yeah.
And it's awesome.
Yeah.
And I love the inclusion of that. So, you know, when we can, we try to get the teachers to communicate with their clients and pay attention. Did people feel successful? Did they seem happy? And if they didn't, then we make a recommendation.
Yeah, I like that. We got a couple questions that have popped up, and the first one was from Valia, and is about EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And we have a guest, Marcia from Florida. Marcia is a doctor of physical therapy that specializes in EDS and Pilates, and she's going to join me in April. So we're going to be doing a whole session dedicated to EDS and the latest research and what kind of precautions you need to work with that. And I'm going to save that one because that's a whole topic in itself. But I will tell you that your gut feeling, Valia, is probably correct. The question is how much mobility. The question is it right to have, you know, like the therapist is telling her not to do any spine mobility? And no spine mobility means rigidity, and that's not what we're looking for. But maybe avoiding some of the excessive loading, like, you know, rollovers and boomerangs, things like that, might be too much on that that pathology early on. So we're looking at how they learn to create that awareness and sense of control and sense of stability with those problems.
And that particular situation is becoming more and more common because
Very
it's
common.
becoming
The
more
diagnosis is
diagnosed. And, and that goes back to basically in a group class setting, is it appropriate to have some, clients that are coming in with issues, and is it appropriate or is it not, even in a lower level class?
Yeah.
And I think really, osteoporosis, EDS, like these are things that aren't going to go away for these people. So if they've created a foundation and they have an understanding and they're in an appropriate level class, and I trust that that they can have somewhat of self-reliance and independence in that class, then I'm okay with them being there.
And what I think too, and you hit the nail on the head, is if they private sessions, and I do think these people need to have some private sessions of empowering them when the class asks you to do this is your modification.
Yes. Yep.
Your own role, you bring your own, moon box, whatever you got to use to modify that exercise so that you're having the best experience possible. You're still in a group setting, but you're not, doing forced compression with osteoporosis. You're not doing high load to connective tissue in, certain exercises. That there's ways to modify it. And what I typically do is say, have a number, 6, 7 private sessions that we really can work through and build out what you're comfortable with so that when you go into a class, you have the tools. I think that's
right.
And we're going to talk about those tools for EDS in a couple weeks in April. And that's going to be a great, great, great webinar. So don't miss it if you're interested in that. The other question that came up, and this is more in line with what we're talking about today, right? And this is from Kasinya, I think is the name, Usum. Says, how you manage not to get tired when you have several lessons in a row. And this is a great question for all of us.
Yeah.
There were times where I was an animal, like I could see patients 50, 60 hours a week, and teaching classes. I could teach all day. I could teach workshops all day, and you do get burnt out. And we sort of made rules, and I'd love to hear what you do, of just not having somebody working back to back to back to back to back more than like 3-4 hours in a row without a break. And that's just common sense to try to stay healthy in this profession, because you're picking up so much energy and giving so much energy, and you have to have some time for yourself. What do you typically do with some of your teachers' schedule?
A couple things. We went from full 60-hour sessions to 55-minute sessions, just to give each teacher a chance to reset their energy, have a moment before jumping right into something else with another client, because it is starting over every hour, right? I mean, it's a new day, a new person. For myself personally, I like to have a group class scheduled in between private clients so that there's just a different energy that I'm fed in a different way. And, there's a laser pinpoint of attention in a private session that can get really exhausting if you're doing it hour to hour to hour, and you can't really be effective, but for so much. And I do think it's different for different people. But for me, having a little time scheduled between each and communicating to the client so they're not like, wait, why are we stopping 5 minutes early? Like, they understand that it's a 55-minute session. But also I try to give all my teachers the ability to teach group classes, even the ones that enjoy working in a more therapeutic way, because they need that difference in energy. They need to break it up. And that is really, really helpful.
And this is sort of the same thing we learned from massage therapists and body workers, right? So they're working in a very fancy spa, and they have to have time built in to regroup, almost cleanse. Like I know some of them have a ritual where they'll wash their hands between every class or between every client, between every patient. And it's not even as much important about just cleansing your hands. It's sort of like cleansing the energy, prepping yourself, refocusing, going back out. And there is a limit, and everybody has a little different clock on that limit. What I would do is think of, at the end of the day, are you feeling satisfied or exhausted?
And I, as a teacher trainer, when people are going through teacher training and they're just, they're finishing up and they're just starting to work and they're trying to figure out, what's realistic. a work week if you're doing this full time. And my personal opinion is 25 hours a week.
I thought you were going to say 60 hours a week.
No. It's 25 hours a week of teaching time. I've done 30 before, but you really start to lose your potency. And if you allow yourself to do that, you're going to suffer in the end because you won't be as effective with your clients and they won't come back.
Yeah, burnout. I see another question up here from Sarah Tyndall in the chat. And
hi, Sarah.
You know Sarah?
I do.
So the idea of documentation, and this was something, I don't know if you remember Joseph that built the whole documentation system, and then he went into PAIR, and we've been working with them as well to come up with a documentation, Joseph Quinn, to come up with a what do you call it, a mobile app that actually allows you to do documentation and prescription that the client can actually have access to. So it does make a big difference to be able to have some kind of follow-up notes or things. You know, we have to do it legally in physical therapy and in massage therapy. You have to do it legally. There's no governing body for us as Pilates teachers, but it doesn't make it any less important, especially in a bigger space where there's turnover sometimes, or where one client might work with 2 or 3 different teachers or different classes, which is very common in our studio, is to have some way of documenting somebody's special needs, or if they have special modifications. So at a glance, you would know who you're seeing that day and not having to start fresh all over again. So yeah. I don't know if you guys have any kind of...
I mean, back in the day, we had exercise sheets, that we would write down and make little checks, and if there were modifications, kind of what they were accomplishing, and files on every client with their health history and bodies to shade sheets and all of that. Now that we're in this digital age, at Remedy, we use Mind Body to leave notes for each other based on our clients, especially if we know that we're going to have a sub, we're going to be out of town, they're going to be working with someone else, or if there's really something specific that needs to be known. And usually we communicate that if somebody's going to be working with one of our clients, their notes in Mind Body. Also, our scheduling people at the front desk, when they intake clients, if they make a phone call and they're, placing them with a specific teacher for a specific reason, then they'll make notes and let that teacher know before they're coming in.
Yeah. A couple of things before we go on to the next topic. Deanna DeVito agreeing with the ability to break up the session. So thank you for that. And 25 hours is a confirmation for her. Mm-hmm. Valia again says, motto, the slower you go, the quicker you will see results. And there's a lot of truth to that. I think that there's a nice balance between the two of, a lot of times with clients, I'll just give them a full movement experience and won't get too nitpicky with them. The likelihood of us hurting somebody in a full experience is pretty low in the Pilates industry. And then at the same time, what will manifest then are the areas that they need to work on that you can pull one piece out at a time, maybe spend a couple minutes in each session refining a movement concept, but still giving them a very full movement. I remember back in the day, we had so many of us that were such nitpickers, and we were guilty of cueing vomit, where we just put way too much information out there. We weren't allowing them to have the experience and to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. How do you feel about sort of that balance between over cueing and under cueing, finding that space?
Well, being a dancer, I love movement in general. So I'm a mover and I like to teach movement. And I believe movement is healing. So if people are coming to me, whether it's in a private session or a group class, and they're coming to me because they want to learn Pilates, they want to be introduced to Pilates, then I am going to give them the appropriate level of Pilates. I'm going to first give them a chance to focus on their breath, to drop into their body, to quiet their nervous system down so they can receive and listen to the information that's coming down the pipe and listen to their body as well.
Exactly.
But after that, and a few movement principles to create awareness, to kind of turn on certain chains of muscles and muscle groups, I'm going to take them into the Pilates exercise because that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
And I give them the correct modifications, and but I take them and give them a whole body movement session with Pilates exercises. And then after that, I might sit with them and say, how did that feel for you?
Yeah.
I noticed this was challenging. You did awesome at this. You rocked that out. But these are some areas that I think we could focus on a little bit more. And are you open to us diving into those a little bit deeper next time?
I like that approach, because the first thing is you're making an awareness internally of things that they could improve or that can help them move better, right? And one of the things we discover in critical reasoning is that if we can identify that carrot that's important to the client, then their buy-in and their practice and their dedication to the movement enhances greatly. And that's really what one of our goals is we want retention and we want to see change, right? So change, they have to be pushed hard enough to have tissue and mental and psychological adaptation. If they're not going to adapt. There's no change. I see that as well in a lot of studios where people teach the same exact thing to the same person for a year, 2 years in. There's no challenge. It's like getting your nails done, right? There's nothing. I know now where to put my hand to get my nails done, and I put my hand up there and they do the job. And instead of like challenging us to take that next step and to learn, and that's a more physiological concept of adaptation or accommodation to load, right? And we have to be able to have mental load and physical load. But if they don't see a buy-in, right?
Yeah, I was thinking they have to buy in first.
And we have our share of clients that just want to have the same recipe. It's like they want to have that, that perfect burrito every time they come in, made with exact amounts of rice, beans, and chicken. And, it's like they're not going to change. And that's okay, because that's what they desire. They're coming in to do that.
And it's working
for them. But I do like to find those little pearls that are motivators for them to see how much potential they actually have as movers. How much more can they do in this area? One last question, and then we'll jump into a question about our teachers. And it's trying to differentiate the class levels. This is from Leslie Mitchell. And, this is a very common problem in all studios of having enough classes with diversity at the popular time to be able to meet the needs of the clients. It's almost impossible. One of the things that we've done in past is we've split up into 2 rooms, and we had 2 classrooms going simultaneously so that we can hit 2 different levels of training at a popular time. So that for us, our popular time is going to be like the 8, 9, 10 o'clock classes in the morning, the 4, 5, 6 o'clock classes in the evening, and then we have smaller group classes that go really early for the early worker and some that go a little bit later at 7 o'clock. But the high times, like how do we accommodate the diversity of clients that we have during those high times? So there's so many people coming in. The classes are full. The leveling, somebody might not be able to, it doesn't make sense for them to come in at 6 o'clock because they got to get their kids home or make dinner, or they have other things they have to do. And the only time you offer that class is 6 o'clock. So what are some solutions that you found to be able to stagger that and to make it so that you can have a variety of classes at different times, just maybe on different nights or different times of day or those kind of things too?
Well, one of the things, just to speak to that a little bit, is that in the group class setting, even in a lower level class, like a foundations class or a level 1 class, I try to let the clients know that doesn't mean that it's going to be an easy class. It just means that you're newer to Pilates and you need to understand how this equipment works. You need to understand the fundamentals to have the appropriate amount of stability and going into the exercises and be safe. And so when we have some of these lower level classes, I make sure that they're giving them still enough of a physical experience while they're there and still working through their whole body, through different functional positions. And so that they don't feel like a lower level class is a waste of their time if that's their 1 hour to work out that day or be physical.
And I've heard you say that a couple of times now, as far as being able to make sure it's a whole body experience. And I think we all have to do that. Even when we, look at our critical reasoning course of patience in Pilates, it still is based on the idea of having a whole body experience. And when we think of things like neuroplasticity happens at night when we sleep. So the more awareness that we bring to them during the movement and the more incorporating as a whole body, the brain has a better chance of learning that movement, right? That's how we learn movement. It's whole body movement. It's not isolated movement. For a long time, we thought it was isolated movement, and isolated movement actually ends up in being very good at isolated movements. But that's all it does. It doesn't really work in integrated movements. I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about how we keep our teachers happy, right? And we have teachers that have been teaching with us for over 20 years, and we encourage them to do additional trainings, to search out things like GYROTONIC, expansion system, Feldenkrais, Tai Chi, other yoga, other movement forms to continue to enrich their ability to teach a more diverse population, to be better skilled as a practitioner. There's good and bad to that, right? And I shouldn't say bad. There's just differences as to how a studio owner deals with that. You have clients have a certain expectation, and these senior teachers of ours that are really amazing teachers are now looking at ways to enhance their work, but it sort of takes them away from some of the basic Pilates that some of our clients might be coming in for.
Right.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's that's tough because I understand both sides. As a teacher, as a mover, I've needed different things at different times in my life, and my body's needed different things. And I get very passionate about the evolution of innovation, and that is all very exciting. And we tend to get really passionate about what's making a difference in our body or what we're seeking out, and then we want to share it with everyone because we're such passionate creatures. But we have to understand that might not be what the client is looking for or what they need. And even if they need it, you have to get the buy-in first before you can take them astray down another path. And the way you get the buy-in is by teaching them what they're coming to learn. So if they're walking in the door and you're advertising Pilates, then you need to teach them Pilates and then talk to them about what you're saying and give them or use things as tools to support what they're doing in a Pilates session. It doesn't have to take over the whole session. So you can divert, for a bit and say, let's go jump on the ooh. Let's go get on a roller. Let's do this or that to kind of dial in and create an experience. And now let's go back over to the reformer. Let's go back. Now I want you to hold on to that experience. So, I think that is a way of doing it.
And that's very valuable. And I hope you guys listened and could hear what Melissa was saying is, people have the expectation of a Pilates class when they come to a Pilates studio. And they have an expectation of a whole body movement, typically, even if they don't fully understand what that is what they should be receiving in this class. And the time to bring in some of the nuances of things or tools that can help enhance the experience for the client should be done as an adjunct to the whole body movement Pilates class. Now, we've seen classes develop to the point where we don't even call them Pilates classes anymore. We call them something else, which is absolutely fine. Yeah. It's just if you advertise it, it's a Pilates studio, a Pilates class with a Pilates teacher, and you teach Feldenkrais, you teach Tai Chi, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, there's a mix-up here. Something's wrong. But if at the end of a Pilates class you did a couple Tai Chi moves or you did a couple yoga poses, there's nothing wrong. You've given them, 45, 50-minute Pilates class, and you're now introducing something with the idea that it's going to help their Pilates even better.
Right.
And I think that's very good advice. I truly embrace that. And, if we sort of had to prioritize things, whole body movement, teach what there is being advertised, before you start expanding into the nuances of our own excitement, right? And this was true. Shelley and I went through this a lot early on in teaching, is we were learning so much in the early 90s that we wanted everybody, Elizabeth Larkin with me as well, and we were excited to have everybody share with us what we were learning. But what we realized is that we weren't teaching the basic skills of Pilates anymore. We were teaching what was exciting to us at a much higher level. And that a lot of times what has to happen is as teachers start getting that higher level of interest and excitement, they still have to remember that they're teaching at basic levels to their clients.
Right.
And, until they get up to those levels and are excited about it. And we realized that that actually caused a lot of disjointedness or disconnectedness from what they really needed to learn. It's like they needed their fundamentals. They didn't need to be talking about the tweaking of how the transverse abdominis and these different things had to work in order to be able to achieve this result. It was like that was too much information for them. They couldn't process it. And they were not having as good of an experience. It wasn't as positive because they were not understanding it. And they don't understand it, then, they're sort of like, well, why am I here?
Well, and I think we have to realize that what we're doing is we're using a movement language. And for us as Pilates instructors, the language that we're speaking is Pilates. So we have to get our teachers and our clients, we have to all start speaking the same language first. And then we can start to, create that buy-in, create the respect and the trust to then go to other layers of work. I do feel like there's props and there's a lot of tools that we can use in the Pilates setting that are appropriate with the Pilates language. But if it is a different class altogether, then you label it as that, and you do, and that's great. We have a class at our studio we call Core and Restore, and that's a very different class than our group apparatus level 1, level 2, level 3 classes.
Yeah, that's good. Is anything else in the back of your mind, like as a studio owner, and sort of advice that you would give to other studio owners or teachers on this webinar that might listen to this webinar of us?
Yeah, I think that I mentioned earlier that I've been on both sides of it, and I do understand the passion and the constant curiosity that we have as movers and the need to keep learning and sort of pushing our boundaries and evolving to keep it fresh for ourselves, to keep it fresh for our clients. But now, being a studio owner, I also understand from the business owner perspective that I never understood as a teacher, the importance of that consistency and creating an experience that can be replicable so that your clients know what they're showing up for. And it sometimes may seem a little controlling, or that you're trying
did you ever feel like you were bored with it,
with the original work?
Yeah, like just getting to the point where it's like, you're excited about learning something new, or when you were learning gyrotonic and gyrokinesis, did you ever feel like you were like you felt like you needed to advance it? Because you are right, in a teaching modality, consistency of the teaching for them to be able to master their basic movement skills and fundamentals is the best way to teach it. Bringing in a lot of new ideas every week and things like that can be too much for a novice to process the information.
Right.
But I find sometimes teachers are just so bored with, some of the classical work, or with that for whatever reason. I mean, It could be they've just been teaching for a long time, or they've just, they're looking for something new. But because I think it's a real problem out there. I think there's a real challenge for Pilates teachers that are loving movement and movement exploration, and then putting on the hat of a teacher to teach a novice Pilates.
Right.
Like it's that, I think that's really at the core of it. It's like, how do we keep our teachers super happy and engaged with the work? And we want them to take Con Ed. We want them to get more training. We want them to learn more and bring things back to the studio. But how do we how do we still embrace and make that exciting? And I don't know that I have the answer to it. I don't know if
Yeah.
you have the answer to it. That's part of this exploration today.
Yeah.
Is trying to bring this up and think of, and I think you've said a couple of things: whole body movement, a whole class dedicated to what's being advertised, and then having some time that you can bring in some specialty or some uniqueness of things that can help people process that class better. I think if that's
Right.
if that's the intention of it, if the intention is to show off the new things that you learned, that might not be the best intention.
Right, right. Well, is it what the client needs?
Yeah.
Or I think that's the question to ask. Because I've been teaching for 25 years. There's been times where I'm going into teaching, I'm like, oh, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do? And I'm like, oh, what shiny object can I pick up to wow this person or to rock their world today? And really having to step back and say, am I doing this for me or am I doing it for the client? But also, I think sometimes as teachers, we also feel we put this pressure on ourselves that we need to wow our students every time and give them this sort of infotainment kind of way of moving. But I've had some really interesting experiences. I was working with I was teaching a Pilates teacher, private, and she had come in one week and we were really diving into the reformer. We spent the whole hour on the reformer working through advanced material. And so she comes in the next week and I'm like, all right, you want to, let's do all caddy today. We're going to do chair and caddy and let's dive deep into this work. And so I gave her this session and I asked her after the session, I said, how was that for you? And she said, well, I honestly was a little bit disappointed because I really felt like I made a lot of progress last week in some exercise and I wanted to feel that success
On the
again.
reformer.
Yeah. And she was like, and I wanted to feel that empowerment. I wanted to feel that success. And we just went and abandoned that and did something different. And I was like,
That's a great gestalt, though.
Yeah, it was. It was a really interesting, aha moment for me. To have that communication before you go in, instead of placing, what you think.
And it goes back to the word you used earlier, communication. I think if we are, I think sometimes we're just too quick to jump into our idea, and it is about communication, right? So I'm talking with somebody, and while they're answering me, I'm already thinking of my next response instead of listening to what that person is telling me, right? That's a very common thing. We're so preoccupied with what we're going to say next or what we're going to do next or what exercise we're going to teach next that we're not really listening or communicating through body language or through them talking to us. And that's really where we need to be. I think that's maybe that's what the take home of today is really seeking first to understand what your client's needs are and then seeing how you create that positive movement experience that they want to come back. And that they're having these mastery moments throughout that keep them excited about moving. I mean, the bottom line is movement. I mean, we know that direct dosing of activity compared to dosing of inactivity both have direct effect on psychological, emotional, and physiological health for all age groups, right? So if we can have that focus on really seeking what is going to keep them most engaged in the work and what do they need for this client needed to have another pat on the back and a confirmation that she's learning how to do these exercises that might be difficult for her, that she's doing them well now before we move on to another task.
Right.
And that's what I heard from that, and I think that's super important. There's another question and comment on, and this is from Shan Alphen, and I'm going to turn this question over to you, Melissa, but it's looking at, leveling classes. Like, what are things you've done, criteria to level classes? This could almost be a whole nother topic in and of itself. Yeah. But maybe a quick, do you have any words of advice to somebody about leveling class?
Yeah. Well, one, it's hard because as much as you try to keep integrity in what you're teaching and create levels and have very clear descriptions, and you can set barriers for people to try to keep them in the right level. Inevitably, there's going to be a studio down the street that doesn't require any levels, and the clients will come to you and they'll say, well, why can't I come to this class? Because I can go down the street and take it and they're not requiring any of this. So that is just a challenge in the industry as a whole, I think. But, the way I set the levels for the class is I set for the foundation levels, it's an introductory level class that's going to go through movement principles. It's going to go through safety on the equipment and the basic exercises. And then I give my teachers a level 1. I will give them a sample class, but I don't, say this is the classical order and you can only teach this every single time you teach. But I say, this is what I consider at Remedy Movement level 1 exercises on the mat, on the reformer, on the tower, on the chair, and then this is what we consider level 2, and this is what we consider level 3. And what we've done in the past is have a level 1-2 class and a level 2-3 class.
That's what I was going to say.
And those are good ways those are the first add-ins to kind of the gateway to get somebody to move up to that next level, because you start introducing some of those higher level exercises, but it's done in a way that's going to be slower. There's going to be more explanation. There's going to be more description than if they were to just jump into a level 2 class where everyone was familiar with the repertoire.
And I love the mixed classes, actually. I think it takes a little bit more expertise on the teacher's behalf to be able to, say, hey, John, while we're doing this exercise, you use bent knees instead of straight legs. Or, while we're doing this, or if you want to have a little bit more of this exercise, take off another half a spring and you'll be able to get a little bit more of a, core work, or you'll get a little bit more strength work in your legs or your groin as you're doing these exercises. So I love the split, but it does require that the teacher is sensitive to what they're seeing in the class. So if you have a level 1, level 2 in the same class, you can still push the class, but you got to be sensitive to what the different players in the class need. I find it much harder to make sure that the level 2s are being stimulated than to slow it down for the level 1s. And I think that's where the mastery of teaching group classes is, where you can observe and you can see that you can sort of manipulate that a little bit and make sure that you're watching, who your level 2s are in that class. And you're going to push them and make sure that they're getting enough repertoire and that we're not talking too much. And that also is the balance between tactile and verbal cueing, is that if I have somebody that's more of a novice, I can be over there doing some tactile while I am giving out the verbal cues that the level 2s are familiar with. And I think that's probably one of the more successful ways of dealing with dual levels coming in at prime time and making sure that you have teachers that are capable of doing that. I do want to jump into one last topic. We're going to scratch it. We got about 4 or 5 more minutes. There is a lot of talk today, and some states have already made it mandatory, but there's discussion of it becoming federal. Melissa and I were talking about this earlier, and that is the importance of independent contractors versus employees as Pilates teachers. And it does create a lot of challenge, and it's as things get delineated more from the government, we have to be more and more sensitive to what that means for us. And maybe just share some of your quick thoughts on, the good and the bad and the ugly of going IC versus employee and how that affects the teacher, maybe more than anything.
It is a challenge, especially, thanks. It's a challenge because the way we've been running our studios for many, many years, and the way people initially start teaching is as independent contractors. It's fewer and far between that people are starting their Pilates career as employees. Although I do think that will change the more, mandatory it becomes. But so one of the challenges with going from an independent contractor to an employee is that it costs the studio owner, the employer, start to pay a percentage of the employee's taxes. So a lot of times the way studio owners deal with that is they lessen the percentage of what they were paying the independent contractor in order to offset the cost of the tax on top of them. And really, that's a really hard pill to swallow for a lot of independent contractors.
And
contractors.
the reality is it's the same thing,
Yeah,
right?
it's the
Because
same.
it's the government saying they're going to get their money one way or another. So if you're an independent contractor, you'll pay more sometimes on your personal taxes as a small business. If you have enough write-offs, you might pay less. And that's why a lot of independent contractors, and I've always been, an entrepreneur. I've always been my own boss. Until recently, I took a job teaching at a university part-time. So it's sort of weird for me to see, how much money gets taken out in taxes. And it's like, what? What is that? But I think that the key on this is understanding that you pay now, you pay later. I think that's the key thing. It's like you're going to pay one way or another, and it will catch up to you. And if you're a very responsible independent contractor and you can make it work in your state, it's usually the cleanest for
The
studio owners.
employer and the employee.
For both.
Yeah.
But if you're getting stuck in that, realize that the conversation could be, if I was working for Melissa and I needed to be employed by state law, is for us to have that discussion that I might be getting paid more as an independent contractor, but completely responsible for my taxes. Where if I had to be employed, the idea is that Melissa's now paying part of my state and federal taxes. And so that's going to cut into my price, but I would have to pay those taxes anyway. And the only loophole around that is if you run your business in a way that you really can write off and show that you're losing money, which nobody really wants to show that they're losing money. So it doesn't work good for credit and other things that you might want if you're running your own business and you need to have bankers behind you. So, to be honest and transparent, they usually end up being the same thing. The difference is how the laws govern it. So, for example, an independent contractor has to be able to set their own times, and they have to be able to do a lot of those things, which muddies the water a little bit. So, we've done things where we've created and saying, we're contracting you to teach this class at this time for the next 3 months or the next 6 months, that you have this obligation as part of it being an independent contractor for us. So that does allow us to set a time in the agreement that they're contracting this class. I can't tell them how to teach the class, which that again comes back into, the culture of the studio. What controls do we have as studio owners? What freedoms do we have as Pilates teachers? And I'm going to come back to the first thing that Melissa said that was spot on today, and that is communication. If you are feeling any of these things in your studio, if you're having these pressure, you have to look at it from both angles. You have to look at it most importantly from the consumer angle, the client, and we have to communicate. We have to be able to be transparent in some of these things to say, look, I know, and as a studio owner, you start getting these incredible lessons of, oh my gosh, I never knew that this was so expensive, or I never knew that there were all these other additional costs. And when somebody comes in as a teacher, they're going like, well, you charged $100 for my session. I'm just using a round number, and you're paying me $45. Where does the other $55 go? Well, it goes very fast. Trust me, it goes very quickly. By the time you pay rent and you pay your taxes and you pay legal fees and you pay marketing and all the utilities, it goes very fast. And so I love having that conversation with our teachers. Like, I love being transparent so they know. And I usually go by what we call the 80-20 rule. And that is that the goal of the entrepreneur is to be able to get rewarded for the investment that they make in opening up a studio and taking the risk. And that is 20%. Now, realistically, in most Pilates studios, it looks more like 5 to 10%. But the goal should be about 20%. But reality, it's like 5 to 10%. And in most businesses, the service provider is making somewhere between 33 to 43% of what they actually collect. So a lot of times, too, when you think of group classes or packages, these are things that often are confusing. Somebody buys a package of 10 and they usually cost 100. Now it's 80 because you took 20% off of it by buying a package of 10. Now it's an $80 collection. And the teacher now is collecting maybe $30 or $35 of that to meet the margin of keeping the doors open for the business. And I just find having that clarity in communication with the teachers, that they can understand, look, to have this facility, to have the equipment we have in here, to have the things that are making this a beautiful experience for you as a teacher, have this cost. And this is the price. Now, if I've had teachers come in and say, well, raise my price. And so I've raised their price and nobody paid for it. I've had other teachers raise their price and people pay for it. So, there are other ways to get around it, but I think that it's important to most importantly is communicate.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts before we close down this webinar on sort of communicating, studio owner, experienced teacher, some of the challenges we have, things that we could share with the audience?
Just that, you know, the teachers that are the boots on the ground are the lifeline for all of us. And you are making huge changes in people's lives. And no matter what your style of teaching is or what you're passionate about, everyone has a little bit of magic and something special to share with someone. So it's valued and appreciated.
Yeah. Well, we want you all to know we love you a lot, and we love our work, and we love the profession of being a Pilates teacher. And, whenever we get a little burnt out, we just need to get back together again, hold hands, get a hug, talk about things, share our gripes, and most importantly, realize what Melissa just said is we love what we do, and we want to provide life-changing experiences for our clients. And there's nobody better. And the research is supporting that. So we're seeing research over and over and over again coming out with these huge meta-analysis showing that Pilates is in the top 3 for interventions for low back pain and for children with different deficits and for cognitive enhancement, emotional enhancement, and physiological enhancement. So we are doing a great work. Know that you're doing a great work out there. Melissa, thank you for everything you do in the community.
Thank you.
Very grateful. And above all things, be kind. And we'll see you next week with another exciting Pilates Hour.